morning, everybody. I'm Randy Credico. This is Randy Credico Live on the Fly here on the Progressive Radio Network. We're going to get right into the show. Last Wednesday and Thursday, a appeal hearing was heard in London in the case of Julian Assange. And we're going to talk to four people, actually five people. We're going to talk to Michael Isikoff, who has been covering, the Assange thing the last couple of months. And we're going to talk to his brother, Assange's brother, Gabriel Shipton, the special rapporteur on torture at the UN, Niels Melzer, and a fellow radio host and podcaster and comedian, Katie Halper. So those are four. And then we're going to we have an interview with Roger Waters, but we're going to play that the following week. I'll explain that later. And that's the reason why I've got two shirts on during this entire episode. I changed shirts for the Roger Waters interview. So we're going to get right into it. We're going to play a song by Roger Waters, a live piece of music at the end, and I'll explain that later. We're going to right now take a quick musical break. This is Niels Melzer playing the piano. Then we're going to interview him shortly. But we're going to come right back with Yahoo News senior investigative reporter Michael Isikoff. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. I'm Randy Credico, live on the fly here on the Progressive Radio Network. We are joined now by the award-winning journalist who came out with the blockbuster piece expose on the CIA under Pompeo to either assassinate or kidnap, bring him somewhere, Julian Assange. And he actually was on, and it astounded a lot of people. I got a lot of text messages. Isikoff is on watching the proceedings. I said, he doesn't get up that early. But lo and behold, you were on, Michael Isikoff. What were you doing up that early? What were you doing up that early?
Early bird gets the worm, man. Look, I'm in Washington, D.C. This was in London. It starts London time, 10:30. If I'm going to watch it, I got to get up, right? So thank God, these iPhones have alarms. They wake you up and, I listened. It was 2 days, by the way. I had to do it 2 days in a row. 2 day hearing.
You did do it 2 days in a row. So Let's go back to your article. We've had you on before. We've had Zach Dorfman on last week.
Right. And my colleague who
and I know there's
done this. Yes.
But I haven't had the third man.
John Naylor,
Orson Welles, the third man, Orson Welles. So tell me, your article that came out, your story, that expose that you did that like shocked the world, was brought up during the hearing the last 2 days. So give us your overview. The floor is yours.
Well, look, the hearing was not about our article, right? This was an appeal by the U.S. government of the ruling by the lower court judge barrister denying the U.S. request to extradite Assange, saying that he would be at high risk of suicide were he sent to a U.S. prison under the conditions that he would likely face. Now, the bulk of the hearing was really about the U.S. assurances that have been provided to the Brits since that ruling, saying, look, Assange is not going to be sent to Supermax in Florence, Colorado. He will not be placed under special administrative matters, which is forms of harsh prison conditions under solitary confinement, and and he could serve his sentence upon conviction, if he is convicted, in Australia, where he can apply to serve out his term in an Australian jail or prison rather than a U.S. prison. So really the bulk of the hearing, the 2 days, was about that, about those assurances. The U.S. government lawyer arguing, a British barrister by the name of Lewis, arguing on behalf of the U.S. government, this should completely eliminate the concerns, alleviate the concerns expressed by Judge Barrister. There's no longer grounds to deny extradition because her opinion was predicated on the assumption that he would be placed in pretrial detention, special administrative matters, ultimately sent to Florence. And the Assange lawyers pushed back, saying there are lots of loopholes in those assurances, including the fact that the Attorney General could revoke the commitment not to put him in special administrative matters if, upon recommendation from the FBI or a member of the intelligence community, that he is still involved in disclosing classified information, which so much of the—
Wait a second. So that really isn't a binding, those assurances are not binding in law. There would be nothing where the Brits could enforce or, go to an appeal court to make
That's
them—
correct. Now, the lawyer, the lawyer for the U.S. government said there's no record ever of the U.S. violating diplomatic assurances it had given to the British government. So, that's their argument. But there are those sort of loopholes that the Assange lawyers zeroed in on. Now, all that said, in the second day, which was a Thursday, the lawyer, Mark Summers, one of the lawyers, Mark Summers, for the Assange team, brought up at great length our article and started reading, quoting from it, saying that, essentially the British government was being asked to send Assange back to a country whose senior officials plotted to do him serious harm. You mentioned assassination. We reported there was talk of that, although that, just to be clear, was never formalized into a actual plan to do so. But there were other pretty aggressive measures that were. The abduction plan that was being pushed by Pompeo was probably the most provocative one. That got raised concerns from Trump White House lawyers that Pompeo was going too far, but it was all part of this broad CIA plan to cripple WikiLeaks, targeting Assange, conducting surveillance, intercepting communications, and we have yet to hear a response from anybody senior in the U.S. government or anybody on behalf of the U.S. government responding to the particulars of what we reported.
But there is an investigation. I don't want to sidetrack too much, but there is an investigation that was on your show. I don't know if it's Conspiracy Land, but or the one that you do.
Skullduggery. Yeah.
Skullduggery.
Adam Schiff, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, has said he is seeking information about what we reported, but not at all clear we're going to get responses, or he'll make public if he gets responses. We just don't know at this point.
Well, let's say they give these assurances, right?
Right.
Which are not binding, and then they got to look at what you wrote and all of those different elements. And that was what they had planned, or what they had talked about. That was not legal. That was not legal if they had carried through with either the kidnapping.
Well, that's why the White House lawyers raised concerns. And if you look at the timeline on this, Pompeo was really enraged. He got all exercised about WikiLeaks, not because of what happened in 2016 in Russia. It was the Vault 7 disclosures by WikiLeaks in early 2017. The Vault 7 is the CIA's super sensitive hacking tools for offensive cyber activity targeting U.S. Adversaries. That sent him into a rage. He wanted revenge against WikiLeaks. That's when he calls WikiLeaks a non-state hostile intelligence service, which opened the doors for the CIA to do all sorts of things targeting WikiLeaks. And then, but at that point, when Pompeo starts talking about an abduction from the Ecuadorian embassy, there was a problem that the lawyers immediately spotted, which is, where are you going to take him? He wasn't at that point under indictment in the United States. There was no criminal process by which, and grounds for which the US government could have legally held Assange at that point. And that prompts the Trump White House folks to start leaning on the Justice Department to accelerate an indictment of Assange. So if the US could get its hands on him, there would be a place to take him legally and put him on trial.
Well, that's a great story, and you can find it at Yahoo News. The one today, you did a follow-up last week to the first story. They're all at the Yahoo News .com website. Let me just a couple more questions. How did the judges, when Fitzgerald and the other lawyer brought up the Yahoo News revelations, did they respond to it?
Yeah, only briefly, one of the judges said something along the lines of, it shouldn't be especially controversial or surprising that the CIA would have had an intense interest in Julian Assange, given his long history of disclosing classified documents. But then it was actually Mark Summers, I believe, who was the lawyer who was laying all this out, said, we're not talking here about intense interest. We're talking about plots to actually do things that were extraordinary, aggressive, and legally dubious.
Yeah, one more question there. I know you have to run. Michael Isikoff from Yahoo News, the award-winning investigative journalist for many years. You watched it. How did Julian? Were you able to see him on the screen?
Only briefly. He was not in the courtroom. He was watching, I think, from the British prison that he's in. Belmarsh, but he was only on or visible briefly, I think, during the first day. I did not see him or notice that he was watching on the second day.
How did he look when you saw him?
You couldn't really tell. It wasn't a very good video. The clarity was not as good as you would like it.
Did you find the whole thing fascinating, watching proceedings in a British?
I was a little disappointed because I thought the judges would be wearing wigs, and they weren't, as far as I can tell. Did you see them wearing wigs?
Well, I didn't get to see it.
Why not?
Well, because I'm not an accredited journalist. I'm just a hack radio host. All right.
Well, I think they had a category for that. You could have signed up as a hack radio.
Put me in there with Morton Downey. All right.
Okay.
Michael Isikoff, thank you very much. And
Sure.
Are you going to be, continuing?
Well, we'll certainly be watching it. Yeah.
All right. All right. Thanks a lot, and good luck with with all of your work.
With whatever. All right. Take care.
We'll be right back with Niels Melzer, folks.
All right.
that was Ellen 9 by my next guest, Niels Melzer, who is really known as being the special rapporteur on torture at the United Nations. And he joins us again. He's also the author of these two books, or actually it's one book, one in German and one is in English, and it's called The Trial of Julian Assange. Welcome back, Professor Dr. Melzer. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you, Randy. Just call me Niels.
Okay, Niels. Well, did I pronounce the piece of music correctly?
You absolutely did. You passed the test.
All right. Well, so did you on the piano. Let's begin. I've seen some of your tweets about what took place Wednesday and Thursday in London at the appeal hearing. Can just go right into it, and I'll give you the floor to give us your overview, what you had problems with and what you might not have had problems with.
Well, I think there's just about everything I have a problem with in this case. But, you know, the bigger context is obviously this is about the extradition request of the US that wants Julian Assange extradited on espionage charges to the US in connection with publication of, you know, secret evidence on war crimes, corruption, and human rights violations in 2010. And so the extradition proceedings are at the appeal stage right now. In January this year, we had the first instance magistrates court's decision, which essentially tied up a very neat package for the US. It looked like a victory for Julian Assange because the judge said that she will not extradite him to the US for medical reasons. But what was really important, what went almost unnoticed, is that she established this precedent case where she confirmed every single legal point that the US had made, confirming that it was a crime to publish these documents and that it was not protected by press freedom, that, you know, although he's accused of espionage, which is the quintessential political offense, that the political offense exception, which prohibits normally extraditions for political offenses, would not apply in this case. I mean, she went to extreme lengths also to ignore all the due process violations, the constant surveillance of Julian Assange, his mistreatment. And so she basically confirmed everything in the US indictment and said, basically, he's extraditable. And then she said, but because of his mental state of health, we cannot extradite him because he would be likely to commit suicide in the harsh conditions of US detention. And everybody was surprised at this kind of U-turn at the last moment in this decision in January. And I explain this in detail now because this is the basis for what's happening right now. Then obviously, the courts knew that whatever they decide in the first instance, the other party, the losing party, would appeal. Right? And now when you appeal in law, when you appeal a decision, you appeal certain legal questions. You are the one who decides, the one who appeals the decision to the next instance decides which questions should be discussed and answered by the next instance, by the appeals court. And so had the first decision in January extradited, had the judge decided to extradite Julian Assange, then Assange would have appealed that decision and would have brought all those arguments of political offense, of press freedom, of human rights violations, of torture, of surveillance, all of these, all the dirty secrets, he would have basically pushed up one level and have it discussed at the high court where the judges is much more independent and competent than at the lower levels. And so that's what the UK and the US wanted to avoid. So they confirmed the precedent case, criminalizing journalism, but said, we won't extradite him, knowing that the US will now appeal the case and bring it to the High Court. But they will only bring those questions to the High Court which they want to be discussed at that level. And that's conditions of detention. Why would the US want this to be discussed at the appeals court? Because the conditions of detention are in 100% control of the US. If the UK doesn't like the US conditions of detention, the US can simply promise, give so-called diplomatic assurances that they will treat Julian Assange in a better way.
Can I stop there? I mean, I asked Isikoff this. Is it, are those diplomatic assurances binding by law, by treaty, or?
Well, they are binding, but what does that mean when you're facing the superpower? You know, it doesn't really mean anything. I mean, the prohibition of torture is binding. It's an absolute prohibition, but it doesn't mean anything when you're facing the US. You know, the prohibition of aggression is absolutely binding. You know, all the war crimes are prohibited and criminalized. That's binding and absolute. But if you're facing the most powerful military power in the world, you can't enforce it, you see? So that doesn't really mean anything. But I suspect that the US would essentially respect their own assurances because for political reasons, because they want to be able to use that instrument again in the future. And so if they're too openly, disrespect their own assurances, then in the future, other countries will say, well, we can't trust you, we can't believe you. But that's not really the issue. The issue is that when you look at those assurances, they're not waterproof. You see, even if they apply them to the T, they're not waterproof. Because when you can see that the US promises they will not detain Julian Assange in ADX Florence, which is one of dozens of supermax prisons. They can detain him in a different supermax prison. They don't have to, so they promise they will not detain him there, and they promise they will not subject him to special administrative measures with some small exceptions. But even if they don't do that, in the US, only about 50 people are subject to these special administrative measures and are, detained in Florence, ADX Florence in Colorado. But you have about 80,000 people. That's 80,000 people that are at any given day in solitary confinement in the US under some different regime that's called administrative segregation or, and they have plenty of denominations for different regimes of isolation. So they have promised not to apply certain regimes and not to put him in a certain institution, but they can put him anywhere else under any other isolation regime. So in effect, they haven't promised anything, right? And they have also promised that he can serve his sentence in Australia, but the fine print says that only applies after all the legal remedies have been exhausted.
That takes years. That takes years, possibly, right?
It can take up to 15 years, yeah, depending on how far Julian Assange wants to appeal the first instance decision in the US. If they sentence him to 120 years in prison and he doesn't appeal it, fine, then, but obviously he will appeal it, because that's his only chance to ever get out of prison again. So he'll appeal it, and he will appeal it up to the Supreme Court, and this can take more than a decade. So in effect, those assurances don't mean much in practice, but it gives the High Court an opportunity, basically a way out, to say, well, the concerns of the first instance court have now been addressed by the US through these assurances. Now, it is also conceivable that the High Court says, well, we recognize those assurances, but they're not sufficient, so we will not extradite him. And then they allow the US to appeal to the Supreme Court. And then at the Supreme Court level, the US will make a bit broader assurances. And then basically all of the instances have been exhausted, and all we've been discussing is the state of health of Julian Assange and the diplomatic assurances. But what we haven't been discussing is the elephant in the room. Because this case is not about Julian Assange's health. It's not, the question is not whether Julian Assange is strong and resilient enough to survive cruel and inhumane detention conditions. The question is, why is a journalist who has done nothing criminal, he has only spoken the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about the misconduct of Western democracies, why is he being persecuted and imprisoned in the first place, right?
Yes, that wasn't even asked. That was not the last 2 days that didn't come up. But go ahead. I don't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
But that's exactly what I'm saying. That's why it was a smart move by the British not to extradite him. in the first lower level court, because it means that Julian Assange will not appeal that decision. And so he will not bring all those questions of press freedom and so on to the appeals court. But the US appealed it, and they only appealed the conditions of detention question, you see? And so that's why we're only discussing this actually completely irrelevant question, because we all know that the conditions of detention in the US, in solitary confinement are inhumane, but we also know that Julian Assange has not committed a crime. So why, you don't extradite somebody that has not committed a crime. And this is really, it's very important that Julian Assange's legal team, that they cross appeal, that they ensure that those questions will be discussed at this court level at some point. To my understanding is, I'm not part of his legal team, but my understanding is that his legal team can cross appeal in case the US wins the appeal, that they can cross appeal afterwards. It will be an additional hearing.
I see. We're talking with Nils Melzer. We're going to take a 30-second break and continue this discussion with Nils Melzer. I'm Randy Credico. This is the Progressive Radio Network. Okay, we're back. We're talking with UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer. So, Nils, let me ask you this question, continuing. Do you think this was a witting, duplicitous move orchestrated by the powers that be or by the judge, that they knew that this was going to happen? Or do you think this was the judge organically making a decision?
Look, I mean, all I can do is speculate, but I don't know how much room there is for speculation when you look at this case and how it has been handled in all jurisdictions, at all levels of every judicial power in all those 4 jurisdictions where there have been proceedings against him, from Sweden to the UK, to the US, to Ecuador, everywhere. Those proceedings have been manipulated. Due process has been gravely violated. The rule of law has not been respected. So why would all of a sudden, the rule of law be respected here? Why does it all fit so neatly? Because had she, had the judge at the lower level of the magistrates court, had she extradited Assange, obviously he would have appealed. And now we would have a huge discussion currently the last 2 days on press freedom, on torture that has been exposed by WikiLeaks and that has not been prosecuted, war crimes that have not been prosecuted. It would be a discussion about why an espionage indictment is not being dealt with as a political offense, which excludes extraditions. There would be a huge discussion about how can you even consider extraditing someone to a country that has so closely surveilled the defendant that they have overheard his confidential conversations with his lawyers and his doctors, that have been part of a concerted effort to psychologically torture and pressure and break the man. It have even discussed direct action against him after the CIA leaks, the Vault 7 leaks in 2017, where they actually planned to kidnap and even assassinate, poison Julian Assange. How can you even consider extraditing someone and into the hands of such a state?
Right.
All of these questions are not being discussed because we're only discussing Julian Assange's state of health and the conditions of detention. So is that a coincidence? Nothing so far has been a coincidence in this case.
Right. You're absolutely right. I just go over some of those points that you made. Let's start with the Siggy, the FBI informant that gave false testimony. Let's just start with that and kind of give us, the people out there who don't know, why that is important.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's good that you mentioned that, because I forgot to mention him. Obviously, first of all, there have been 3 different indictments against Julian Assange. The first one was a secret indictment in 2018 for a single charge on, a computer fraud. charge. And this was then superseded by an indictment in 2019 that included 17 charges under the Espionage Act, all of which refer to receiving, obtaining, and disclosing secret, national security information. But we're not talking about anyone who has been employed by the U.S., he's not an American citizen, he wasn't in the U.S. He's a journalist who received those documents from a whistleblower. So that's obviously not espionage, that's journalism. But then when the U.S. administration realized that they're on thin ice with those espionage charges, in 2020, last year, they once more superseded that indictment and expanded it and the factual base of it. And they added a lot of information, suggesting that Julian Assange had encouraged people to hack, to steal information, that he had basically incited and conspired to motivate people to commit those crimes. And one of those key witnesses, who's called a teenager in the indictment of 2020, that's the Siggy you refer to, an Icelandic citizen, and he's a habitual criminal who has been convicted multiple times, I think about in 10 cases, if I'm not mistaken, on pedophile offenses. He has, multiple fraud and theft cases. I mean, he's an actual, habitual criminal. And so he has been promised by the FBI immunity from prosecution for all of these crimes in return for false evidence. And he actually admitted to that. And he's in prison now again in Iceland. But so, I mean, these are the methods that the US government has resorted to, apart from, planning kidnapping, planning assassination, surveilling him with microphones, even in the bathroom. I mean, recording his confidential conversations with doctors, with lawyers. They even, seized all of his belongings in the embassy. And also when he traveled originally from Sweden to Germany, all his luggage disappeared and was stolen, presumably by the Secret Services. So because no one ever found this luggage, he was the only one losing the luggage in a direct flight between Berlin and Stockholm. This is not some kind of a provincial developing country. You don't lose luggage just like this. And so
on a one-way flight, it wasn't even a way ticket.
Of course. And clearly, why would we be surprised? In 2010, Julian Assange was on the radar of the CIA, of the national security services of all Western states, the allies of the US. You would expect that to be the case because he had just published the biggest ever leak, in military history. Right. Obviously, he was on the radar of the Secret Services. And so when his luggage disappears on a direct flight between two European capitals, and the computer system says that his luggage was checked in, they confirmed that, but then it disappeared before it reached the X-ray, which is 5 feet away.
Right. That's not a coincidence. All right, so you're talking about Siggy, you're talking about stolen luggage, you're talking about CIA. None of this stuff was brought up deliberately. They didn't want this stuff to resurface. They didn't want to visit it again. And then, of course, what you talk about in your book, the whole Swedish question, let's talk about just briefly about what would come up about what the Crown Prosecutor Services did, which I think is a violation. It's almost obstruction of justice, what they did to keep the Swedish case alive.
Yeah, the purpose of the Swedish case, you see, none of us knows what was at the origin of this. There was some, encounter between Julian Assange and those women that was voluntary and it turned sour. Was this because, we have to acknowledge, and everybody who knows Julian Assange personally has experienced that he has this slight variation of autism, which means that he's super intelligent, is very, courteous man, but he somehow, you have to verbalize things if you want him to notice what you want to know from, when you ask him a question, you have to verbalize your question so he knows what you want from him. Otherwise, he just goes off in his own thoughts. And so that obviously in this encounter with the women probably, caused some misunderstandings just because of the way, this interaction worked, because they didn't know each other. So they had this sexual encounter. It turned out, to involve unprotected sex. Those women were afraid that they had contracted HIV or become pregnant, and they wanted him to test.
And that was it.
HIV
that
test.
was it.
That was it. And
But I want to talk about the FOIA stuff that Stefania Maurizi got, the complicity or the determination of the CPS to keep this case alive.
Obviously, and all of this I summarized just to say, so this is a local case in Sweden, which is absolutely legitimate for the police to investigate. If there is something to investigate, if the women complain about something, this has to be investigated, no discussion about it. But it's really of no concern for the UK, right? So Julian Assange stays in Sweden, tries to contribute, tries to get interviewed. The prosecutor avoids interviewing him. At some point, he thinks, I guess she just wants to drop the case. So, can I leave? He asks the prosecutor, can I leave the country if you don't want to, interview me? And she says, well, there are no obstacles. And at this time, I don't have anything, it's not the time to interview you. So he leaves the country. And at that point, they issue an arrest warrant and claim that he wanted to evade justice. Now he becomes suspicious and says, that's weird. I've just extended my stay in Sweden by a month, and I've offered multiple times, to be questioned, interrogated by the police. And they said, no, you can leave the country, it's fine. And as soon as I leave, they steal my luggage and they accuse me of evading justice. So he went on to London and said, well, look, I'm coming back to Sweden, but I want to be sure that you're not going to send me to the US. Can you guarantee that? And the Swedes don't agree to assure that. And then you see this email correspondence between the Crown Prosecution Service and the Swedish prosecutor, where the Swedish prosecutor at some point says, well, he's left Sweden, he's not going to come back. Now he's even taken asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy. There's no point in maintaining this arrest warrant, right? And then the British say, don't you get cold feet, maintain this. And don't you ever come to London to question him here, although there's a mutual legal assistance agreement that actually provides for that. So they want the British authorities, although we don't know, it involved Swedish women. It was, the alleged offense was alleged to have happened in Sweden. It didn't involve the British interests. But as soon as you can see, as soon as Assange took asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy, the British Foreign Secretary, William Hague, threatened Ecuador with an invasion of the embassy. They would physically raid the embassy to arrest Assange. And that's a grave violation of diplomatic law. You don't do that because there is this man who agrees to be interviewed, through mutual legal assistance, who's not even charged of any crime. There's no evidence. You don't raid an embassy in this situation. You only raid an embassy, a foreign embassy, when there is a terrorist threat, when there's a hostage taking or something very serious going on. So this speaks to how serious a threat Assange presented to the UK. And now we start getting the pieces together. This is not about sexual offenses. It never was. It's not about bail violation and this kind of, which is a petty offense. This is really about power politics and, the most powerful military powers in the world, the US, the UK, and their allies, wanting to maintain a space of secrecy. They feel threatened by the the model, the approach of WikiLeaks that inspires people, where huge quantities of information, secret information, can be leaked anonymously. If this proliferates, if we, they think in 5 years we have 15,000 WikiLeaks all over the world working through the internet, we lose control. We can't control and keep things secret anymore. And this means the whole business model of the CIA and their allies goes bust. It no longer works. That's why they feel so threatened, and that's why they're persecuting Assange and throwing all these, the mudslinging and everything is all about that, trying to get the public to disengage from Julian Assange, not to believe him, to think that he's a hacker and a rapist and a spy and a traitor and has blood in his hands, and all of these things that he has been accused of. None of it has been proven so far, you see? But what has been proven is war crimes, torture, corruption on this part of the states, but none of this has been prosecuted.
Right. And you know what? They did not drag, and by what Baraitser did, it obviated for them the need to dredge back up all of the stuff you were just talking about in front of the world Wednesday and Thursday. They kept it down to the one narrow thing. Professor Melzer, I was going to ask you to summarize. I think you just gave us a great summary. I appreciate all the work. Your book is coming out February 8th, and you can pre-order it right now. It's in English. It's called The Trial of Julian Assange by Nils Melzer. I guess they can get that on Amazon. Am I correct?
Yes.
All right. So we appreciate your time, Professor Melzer, and we'll talk to you hopefully soon with some good tidings out of London. Professor Nils Melzer, the Special Rapporteur on Torture. We're going to play a little piece by Nils Melzer. This is his version of Moonlight Sonata, and we'll be back with the brother of Julian Assange, Gabriel Shipton. We'll be right back. Okay, we are back. That was Nils Melzer. A little bit of Moonlight Sonata. I'm Randy Credico Live on the Fly. We're going to be joined in just 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes, by the brother of Julian Assange, who has a new documentary called Ithaca. It opens up, I think November, we'll ask him. In Melbourne or in Sydney, we'll ask him. But here's the trailer. We're going to play the trailer and come back with Gabriel Shipton right afterwards.
What's at stake? For Julian, his life. For you guys, any prestige that you can gather as a journalist protects you. So this will be the end. Nobody ever again will be able to get the assistance of 100,000 people worldwide to defend them, 100 lawyers, 6 jurisdictions in order to defend Julian Assange. It'll never happen again. If he goes down, so will journalism.
We will never accept that journalism is a crime in this country or any other. Let's not forget that US agents plotted to kill Julian on British soil. Their illegal operations even targeted our 6-month-old baby. Julian's freedom is coupled to all our freedom, and our freedoms are lost in the blink of an eye. I ask you all to shout louder, lobby harder, until he is free. I call on the President of the United States to end this now. Let our little boys have their father. Free Julian. Free the press. Free us all.
Okay, that's the trailer from Ithaca. And Gabriel, first of all, welcome back to the show. It's good to see you again. This is Randy Credico on Progressive Radio Network. I got to put that out there. Gabriel, good to see you.
You too, Randy.
And so tell me, this movie opens up in Melbourne or is it Sydney? Sydney.
Yes, having its premiere at Sydney Film Festival in November, on November 7th. So we'll be playing three screenings at that festival in November in Sydney.
And then you plan to fan it around the world at festivals. Hopefully it will be at the one at Tribeca and then eventually be an Academy Award winner. And you're the producer, and it really it tracks the work of your father and Stella Morris, Julian's partner. Basically, is that the theme of the documentary?
Yes, yeah, that's right. We follow John and we follow Stella. We started filming, around 2019 when Julian went into prison. We started filming with John, following John. Obviously, Stella was still, she was, she hadn't come forward at that point. So we sort of track a little bit of her journey as she comes out as an advocate, as such a powerful advocate that she is now for Julian.
Well, they both have been, your father and you. You and your father, because I saw you at Belmarsh. You weren't. I don't know. I didn't see you prior to 2019. When did you and your father really plunge yourselves into this? In terms of public advocates. Well,
I think it goes back to 2019 for me, Randy, when I went to Belmarsh to see Julian, and over the years I'd really never seen him in that state before. It was when he was on suicide watch in the prison. And I sort of left that day thinking, that I might never see him again, you know what I mean? And that's sort of, that's when I knew that I had to, I had to do whatever I could at that point, start advocating publicly, using, my experience as a filmmaker to just get the message out there of what's going on and what's at stake in Julian's case and, what has been done to him over the years. So that sort of launched me on my advocacy path.
Yeah. So you and your father put everything else aside and you've just plunged yourself. I've seen it. I've seen you crisscross the country, the U.S. Back earlier this year. I think beginning in June all the way to the end of June. And then you were here earlier that year lobbying Trump. So you've put on a lot of air mileage in the last year, crisscrossing this, not just this country, but going back and forth to London. So you're doing a superb job. And I guess this is part of it, this movie, and you're going to continue putting the pedal to the metal, the way you guys seem to be operating.
Yeah, that's right. Throwing everything we have at it. At Randy, so it'll be good. Well,
I saw you there. You were at Belmarsh the first half of this, and I guess you were monitoring the events, the appeal hearing. What was your general overview of that process?
Well, I think it all feeds back into that, the investigation done by Michael Isikoff and Zach Dorfman, and I can't remember the third journalist. But
neither can I. And I just interviewed Isikoff, and I asked him and he couldn't figure out the guy's name either. Go ahead, I'm joking.
Yeah, so that sort of frames this whole proceeding for me. That this proceeding, it has this aura of legality, but really, you have to go back and look at these plans by the CIA to kidnap and murder Julian, and see that, you know, those plans never really went away, you know, and they've just been enacted in a judicial sense. So, you know, he's been kidnapped in April 2019. He was kidnapped judicially from the embassy, and then
He was kidnapped. I mean, let's make no mistake about it. They said, well, you know, the plans didn't go through, but they went in there and basically kidnapped him, and now they're holding him hostage. That's the way I look at it.
That's exactly right. So that's how I view all these proceedings, is that this is the enactment of the plans that you know, that were being talked about in the CIA those years ago, and you know, they started under Trump and they're still going now under Biden. And you know, Nils Melzer calls it a murderous system before our eyes. So you know, the murder plans are still going on. They are trying to kill Julian. There are people who want Julian dead. And they're trying to do it, and they're trying to do it right in front of us, right before our eyes, to make an example of him. So I think that's how I look at these proceedings, is you know, just a continuation of those plans that were revealed in that investigation. Right.
It's not isolated to that. That's not like some you know, anomaly that they wanted to kill him. This is a plan that the CIA probably has had for a long time. They want to get even with him. They want to quiet him. You know, they don't want that kind of operation. They don't want there to be, as somebody, I think Melzer said, another 1,000 WikiLeaks to emerge. And so this is really a death by 1,000 cuts. That's, instead of just a straight shot to the head, it's death dragging him through this process. Keeping them at Belmarsh. The conditions are not much worse or better there than they are in the U.S. But if they get these assurances that they made the other day, the Justice Department, these Hail Mary assurances just to get him over here, and they say he'll be okay. But he won't be okay, will he?
No. I mean, they're not. You know, the assurances, they're not worth the paper they're printed on, Randy. I mean, look, and this is what's so bizarre about it. You know, this press freedom, this Drop the Charges coalition, these 25 press freedom human rights groups, calling this, you know, the biggest threat to press freedom in the USA. And we spent 2 days talking about prison conditions in the USA, talking about Julian going to act out on suicidal impulses. So what the issue here is not these, it's all a distraction, you know. What they don't want to talk about is this attack on press freedom, and so they're keeping the conversation going around prison, you know, U.S. prison conditions. I think, you know, we just have to focus and keep it on what this is about. You know, this is about shutting down press freedom. This is about contracting the First Amendment, so that national security reporting cannot continue or will stop. And that's what this is about. It's not about prison conditions or Julian's health. It's about our democracy.
Yeah, that's that being the point that they were arguing the other day was such a transparent ruse by them. It was so obvious that they just wanted to distract. It was basically a red herring from what the real issue is. And they don't want to bring back and throw out the laundry of what the CIA did with Vault 7. They don't want to show the war logs. They don't want to show the assassination attempts and everything else that they did, all the illegal stuff between Sweden and the CPS, UK, Crown Prosecutor Services, Ziggy, the Jeffrey Dahmer type of dude that was their key witness. They don't want that to be shown to the public again. They just want to focus on prison conditions in the U.S. I mean, what a red herring that is.
Yeah, that's right. I think, you know, and it keeps everyone talking about it, talking about Julian's health, talking about prison conditions. And you know, I think we all really need to just focus on, you know, what is at stake in this case. You know, what is really at stake for us all. You know, not just Julian. I mean, I hadn't. That was the first time I'd seen Julian in quite a while, and I was taken aback at the way, you know, his appearance. You know, I hadn't seen him. He looked significantly older. And
Since the last time you saw him was last year in 2020. When you saw him after you and I saw him at Belmore's, that proceeding. Did you see him in person after that?
Yeah, I saw him in October, at the end of October 2020, just before the prison went into the long COVID lockdown, the 10-month COVID lockdown. So, just seeing him again in that state, I can't imagine what Stella and John are going through at the moment. I mean, it was hard for me watching from Australia, but it must be so difficult.
I can't imagine either what they are going through and what Julian is going through. I mean, where is the threshold? Where's the threshold point? How much more could he possibly take? He's in there for bail jump. I mean, there's no reason for him to be in there. Like I said, I saw him last year, and I saw him 3 years prior to that. And he was full of bounce, but man, like I said, where is the threshold where he goes on to the other side? He's really got a lot of resilience. What's the message out there to the public, to my listeners or viewers? Where do we go from here? What do you urge them to do at this point in time?
Well, I think, I always ask people to contact their elected representatives. I think that, that's worked for us in other countries. Get in touch with them, let them know that what this case means to you, your rights, your democratic rights, your press freedoms, your First Amendment rights. Direct action is a great one always. I think John talks about this, about claiming the space. If you're doing direct action out on the streets, banners, placards, really sort of claiming the space and making yourself own the streets. You know what I mean?
Right. I always said that you got to get the asses of the masses onto the street, and I've been a big advocate. I participated all my life. I know it's really important to get people out there engaged and do what they can. I'm a older gentleman right now. I don't have the energy that I once did. We can perform. We can just do whatever you can do right now. You got a documentary coming up in Sydney in a couple of weeks, or even less than that. So I mean, you keep going and going and going, and don't right now. More than ever. Right now is the time to accelerate the kind of commitment that you have, not to drop back. Right now, as we saw what happened the other day, that these are serious people that we're dealing with. So we have to be just as serious, just as organized, and deploy whatever you have that's special. If it's your feet, if it's a radio, podcast, or whatever, do whatever you can. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. Even, just using your telephone, I think, some things are just that simple, and they all feed into this, they're all little tributaries to this great river, that will overcome this persecution of Julian.
Well, Gabriel, any last words? We got just a few seconds left that you would like to convey before we head off to Katie Halper.
Yeah, just a big thank you for all the work you do, Randy and Kelly. So I think, always great to watch your shows and great to be here to be on with you.
All right. Well, it's great. It's always really, I don't know the word great, but it certainly is enlightening talking to you and inspirational, and look forward to that film. Gabriel Shipton, let's just keep working together. All of us, everybody. This is the time. I don't care what group you're with. We have to work together. There can't be any nonsense of division.
Yeah, unity.
Work together.
Unity.
Unity. We'll be right back with radio podcast host and comedian Katie Halper in just 60 seconds. Okay, that was Nils Melzer playing Moonlight Sonata. I'm Randy Credico. This is Randy Credico live on the fly here on the Progressive Radio Network. And joining us now, one of the big hits last Sunday at Stand Up for Assange, or Stand Ups for Assange, at the very famous landmark Theater 80 St. Mark's. And she was just fabulous. And she's got a show called The Katie Halper Show. And she's co-host of Useful Idiots with Matt Taibbi. Great to see you again, Katie.
Thanks, you too. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I've got everyone on this show today has a dog. So I did basically a dog show, and that was a very nice dog that you showed me earlier.
Oh, thank you. I'll put in a photo you can cut in if you want for the video.
All right. Well, let me ask you a question. Is that dog politically active?
She is. She's a big Bernie bro. I know Bernie's a little to the right of some of our listeners, and in some ways, he actually, it would be nice if he spoke out against the persecution of Assange. He hasn't, but she was definitely big into Bernie during the primaries, both primaries.
My dog,
a lot of Hillary dogs and Biden dogs.
My dog was, featured because I went over when he was in New York. We did a 24-hour marathon. I'm surprised you weren't there that day. At the Comedy Cafe in Brooklyn. We did just before the primary. I had like 50 performers.
I remember that. Yeah.
And Bianca went over to the headquarters there, and she took a picture with Nina Turner.
Oh, nice.
And with a sign. So at any rate, she's a little soft on Bernie right now. Not very happy. Why do you think that is so? Because on Assange, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Why do you think that's so? Since Assange exposed how rigged the game was, where he could have won.
It's interesting. I think Sanders never went kind of steered clear of that topic. I think he's much more than I think probably he should be a team player. As much as people love saying he's not even a Democrat, which I always thought was so funny. It's like, okay, you want him to run as an independent? You think that's going to work out well for the Democrats if he runs as an independent in a presidential election? But I think he honestly didn't want to sabotage the Democrats as much as they deserve to be exposed. I think he probably on this issue, he's very principled, but he's also shrewd, which means I think he makes calculated decisions. And I'm not saying it's the right decision, but I think he probably thinks that there are just certain things that aren't worth being principled over. Again, I'm not justifying it, but I assume that I'm sure that behind closed doors, he thinks Assange should be free. It's unfortunate though, that it's become it's a bit of a snowball effect, right? People don't speak out on it, and then it becomes a fringe issue. People think it's not politically savvy to speak out on it because other people aren't speaking out on it.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know. What do you think?
Well, what I think is, just take a look at comedy. I could go to you, I could go to Lee, the people that we had the other day. But it's like it's a very small field out there. People who I would even ask, because I don't think they understand the issue that well.
Yeah.
What do you think? You think that it's because they hate Trump so much, and they think that WikiLeaks was responsible? Is that the reason why?
I think that's part of it. I think also that you had a media kind of intent on either hiding the story or vilifying him or making him weird or showing that he was quirky and all these things. It's just funny because liberals pat themselves on the back for, I may not agree with what you have to say, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it. Or they get the idea that who cares about someone's personality, but they are victims of this very scary groupthink. And I think a lot of it is, I do think Trump broke people's brains in a way that, of course, makes them these people are actually priming the pump for more Trump. That rhymes. I didn't realize that, but they are. We actually had David Sirota on the show on Useful Idiots this week, and he has a podcast called Meltdown, and it's all about how the Democrats contributed to Trump and Trumpism. And I do think that we see that. It's sad that people, it's like they're responding to Trump and Trumpism in the exact opposite way that they should be, which is they think that you have to punch left, you have to attack the left, you say, but Trump. Everything, if you ever criticize the Dems, they point to, but Trump. We get it. Right. Trump is bad. But also Trump wasn't supposed to be the guy standing up for working people. And look at what the Dems just did now. You know, Biden, he never wanted this stuff. He would have fought for it. They used the rotating villain to vilify. Not that they're not villains; they are villains. Manchin and Sinema, they're just two of many villains. And Biden, if he wanted to fight for stuff, he would have. And it's so funny hearing people compare him to FDR. He's like, I don't know what FDR they're talking about.
The
Not
good part of FDR. FDR had a lot of flaws.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Maybe they're comparing him to the bad. Maybe he is like the internment camp FDR in that way.
Or the anti-lynching law that he wouldn't pass.
Yeah,
right?
so in that way, he's like that. That's the FDR that he's similar to. So we should actually agree with that analogy. We should just specify it's the reactionary racist parts of FDR.
All of those programs, they excluded workers that were, the WPA, all these different programs that he initiated. There weren't a lot of blacks that were available, and there were not farm workers that were, had it, coming. It was just a certain class. But we're drifting away a little bit from Julian Assange. You have been a strong supporter for a long time. And do you feel that this could slip over into, if he is sent over here and he is put away, that might slip over to the vehicle that you have as a stand-up and as a podcaster and as a radio host?
You mean like we would be at risk?
Yes.
I think that, my co-host of Useful Idiots, Matt Taibbi, does real, kind of very hard-hitting, inconvenient journalism. He went after Goldman Sachs. And some of these things that they're basing their persecution and prosecution of Assange on are based on, even if you just get something that's classified, like literally it could be mailed to your house and you could get in trouble for that. Maybe I'm naive. I feel like I feel a little bit like I like to think I take on power or I criticize power, but I'm not doing what Assange did. So, I think unfortunately I'm not that brave. I'll just say I'm not that brave. I never feel like I'm doing stuff that really, maybe it risks my reputation, but I don't feel like I do stuff that will really get the authorities involved. I mean, I'm sure I'm on lists. I'm sure you're definitely on lists.
I think so.
But I think so. Don't you think you're on lists? Don't be humble.
At my age,
sure you are.
Put me on a list,
Well, if anything, you'd be on it earlier. You're still on it. You got on earlier. You had more years to get on the list than I did.
All right. Well, please join me on that list. Now, what you're saying.
I think that I mean, just to go back to your question, I actually think it's funny. Sometimes I go back and forth because I'm like, well, of course, Rachel Maddow should be outraged, should be speaking out, and she did for 1 minute, I think, say once something bad about that condemned this because it was Trump who did it. When Trump went after Assange, she hasn't said anything about Biden continuing to go after Assange. And again, as I keep saying, siding with Trump and Pompeo over Barack Obama, right? Like going to the Trumpist side, not the Obama side in terms of.
I like when you say that, by the way. I think that's a good, not a slogan, but a good
talking point.
Talking point that you said that the other night. And you keep hammering that they're siding. What was your line about it? Go, just repeat that.
I don't even. Did I have a joke about it? Well, they're siding with Trump over Obama. Oh, I mean, this idea that that like part of the liberal narrative, and to some extent, there's something there, but it's exaggerated. Trump is this Cheeto. What do they call him? Like Cheeto. Mussolini with dementia, who's attacking norms and is alienating us from our enemies abroad, our allies abroad. And then Obama is the Harvard law professor. He's rational. He's a great thinker. Constitutional law professor. Excuse me. He graduated from Harvard, but he's the constitutional law professor. And he understands nuance. He understands justice. But why then is Biden on the Cheeto Mussolini track and not the sophisticated statesman who happened to be the president to his vice presidency track?
Right.
I don't get why people aren't up in arms about it. Really, they would be up in arms. They were rightly up in arms about. I mean, the thing is, what did Glenn Greenwald say? If Snowden had exposed Bush's crimes instead of the crimes under Obama, there'd be a huge statue erected to him in front of MSNBC's headquarters at 30 Rock. But there isn't, because the truth that he exposed was inconvenient. And you just see this very jingoistic McCarthyite guilt by association stuff that people should be embarrassed by. And Daniel Ellsberg, these are people who, for the most part, consider Daniel Ellsberg a hero, in large part because because he was exposing Nixon's crimes. And again, Daniel Ellsberg, if you agree with him, if you think he's a hero, you should probably take his advice. And he says that he opposes the persecution of Assange, of Manning, and Snowden. He talked about how actually Malcolm Gladwell did a piece on him that got facts wrong, kind of vilified Snowden. So I think that it's shameful. Again, just all you have to do is be the resistance liberal that you are, not you, Randy, but people out there, be the resistance liberals that you are, and fight against Trumpism and authoritarianism. And part of and Trump, his attack on the Fourth Estate, this is a guy who was vilified for attacking the media, attacking a free press, attacking free speech, for being like a thug, a goon, lots of comparisons to dictators. So why on earth are you siding with him, Joe Biden and Merrick Garland? What happened to your rule of law? Oh, right. and media. And so this goes back to, I got a little off track, but what I was thinking at first is I'm torn between whether or not Rachel Maddow and all the people who are silent about Assange, whether they're being stupid and self-sabotaging, or whether they're being smart and they realize that they would never take on power the way that Assange did. So none of this would ever come back and bite them in the ass. I think maybe they're wrong. And of course, if there's a Republican back in power, how much will this precedent be used against them? You know what I mean? I think that maybe in some ways they're smart because they realize that they never come close to the bone the way that Assange does. So no one's going to go after them, but maybe they would under a Republican.
Right.
It's hard to imagine them being brave, but
then you got Ari Melber, hasn't said anything, and he's
a lawyer.
Yes, he's a lawyer. I don't know if he's ever defended an indigent person or any person in a court of law. I don't know if he's ever practiced.
I don't know if he. Yeah,
maybe business law he has.
I'm not sure, honestly, but it is. It's just so, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, you would think, again, I don't care if people. Like Ryan Grimm talked about this, how they always do this. They take someone who they smear and make a weirdo. Matt Taibbi calls it the ick factor, right? They focus on a personality, which is really irrelevant. And I'm not saying everything they said about Assange is true anyway, but they focus on quirky things or personality that has nothing to do with this. And then that distracts people, or they focus on the alleged, way that he allegedly gave the election to Trump. Again, even if that were true, any principled person would be able to say, okay, but that's not what he's on trial for, what he's being extradited for. But people's brains are broken by this, and all they hear is 2016, again, even though it has nothing to do with it. And I mean, do people not remember? I think it speaks to what cheerleaders people are and how partisan they are, not principled. Because if you care about any of the things that people who hate Trump from the left claim to care about, you'd be grateful for collateral murder, for the video that exposed what happened in Iraq, because you, in theory, don't want war crimes. In theory, you oppose the killing of civilians, the killing of journalists. Again, coming back to the issue of journalists. But as we know from Max Blumenthal's reporting and other people's reporting, you had journalists spied on in the embassy who didn't do anything about it.
You had a radio host here that was spied on. Did you know? I was spied on.
Oh, yeah. But you actually speak, and Stefania Maurizi has a case, but Ellen, I can never remember her name, from the Washington Post.
Right.
She hasn't done anything about it, even though they went through her stuff.
She just let it go. We're talking, let's take a quick break.
Sure.
We're going to take a quick music break, and we'll continue this discussion with the host of the Katie Halper Show and the co-host of Useful Idiots, and that is Katie Halper. We'll be right back.
got her name.
Okay, we're back. I'm Randy Credico Live on the Fly. We are talking with Katie Halper, the host of the Katie Halper Show and co-host of the Useful Idiots, along with Matt Taibbi. So let's continue talking about MSNBC because there's a whole list of, they called themselves Lean Forward. Right. That's
Right.
the slogan.
Yeah.
And
That
I
was-
say
right.
lean for war, not lean.
Oh yeah, it's good. So
because
they were right again. They were just missing. They were just off by one letter.
one letter they were off, and I don't watch it anymore. I was watching it for a while, and I was on it to explain myself that there was no back channel. I mean, can you imagine?
Oh, they let
anybody?
you on? They let you on?
I was on like 9 times when in
Whoa.
2018. 2018 was it? Yes. In fact,
Who shows?
Ari Melber. I was on Kate Bodwin's show. I was on, I don't know, Ali
Yeah.
Velshi, because
Huh.
it was that connection with Roger Stone that was
Right.
foisted on me, which, I mean, you as a logical person, can you imagine that Julian Assange would get a guy like me? He doesn't even know him. I had him on my show one time in
Yeah.
2016, and he would give me stuff to give to Roger Stone. Does that
I
make
know.
Why would
I
he
mean-
give something that's like a great story, put and say, here, pass it to Roger Stone?
Yeah.
How fucking illogical.
I
is
know.
that?
I mean, did people see the show that you did the other day? It was great, but it was very late. You know, it ran late. You're not, no offense, but you don't want to give you like super important files.
No, right. Because why would you give me files? And can you imagine giving them?
I mean, same thing with me. I drive someone's case. I drop them. I'd forget about them. I'd leave them on the stove and make some tea or something, or whatever. I'd write notes on them by accident. So yeah.
Yeah, I left my jacket. I left
There
my
you go.
jacket on the Palisades. I went.
Yeah.
I stopped in the Palisades Parkway. Went and got some empanadas at a gas station. Came back out, and I left my jacket inside. So
Yeah.
I'm here in cold weather without a jacket. How do you like
Yeah,
that?
you'd have salsa verde over these important files had
Right.
you taken them. So that's never a good idea. So yeah.
I like.
And he's a smart guy, Assange. I mean, say what you will, right? People who vilify him think he's smart. So again, that theory doesn't work. But
But
maybe
why would you, if you had a story like that as a journalist, would you, if you were sitting on a hot story, would you give it to somebody else to like, here, you put it out first and then I'll put it out?
maybe he thinks you're a stoner. So I thought you'd have connections to Roger
I
Stone.
used to be, but that's why
There
I'm
you go.
drinking non-alcoholic beer here.
Oh yeah. I'm
so,
having coffee because I'm
Now,
coffee addict.
anybody else you want to hammer at MSNBC or CNN? This is the time.
I
to
mean,
do-
all of them. I think Michael Isikoff. I salute him for. I respect that
we
he'll
interviewed
go-
him today. Be careful.
No, I'm gonna say I respect him. I respect him for going on Aaron Mate's show, Pushback. I respect him for facing pushback. I respect him for actually talking about this stuff, doing a story on it, exposing how the CIA actually considered killing or talked about killing and or kidnapping Assange. And again, it is just striking that we are talking about a case that in any world, any country with a semblance of democracy or a semblance of rule of law or sense of justice, they'd be running away from this case, whether or not they wanted it. They could really want to go after Assange, but just for optics, they'd say, well, you know what? Maybe considering our star witness is a sex offender who admitted to lying and has also been charged with embezzling, maybe given the fact that we now know that it's been exposed, not by some fringe reporter in some fringe outlet, but at Yahoo News by Michael Isikoff, that the CIA was considering and talking about kidnapping or killing Assange, maybe because we know that a Spanish security company was spying on Assange and literally taking out UC Global, a Spanish security firm, was spying on him and taking out his baby's diapers, literally going through the garbage, trying to somehow do some kind of testing on the baby's stool, which we know about because someone who worked at UC Global was disgusted enough by it to tell the mother of Assange's children, Stella Morris, maybe just for the sake of optics, just so we can pretend to care about democracy and rule of law, maybe we should drop this case and follow Obama's lead and not Donald Trump's lead. But somehow...
I like it when you say that. Yes.
but somehow they're not putting that together, or they know that they're so entitled and they face no accountability that, again, I don't know whether I think that they're just smart and evil. They're not even being stupid, because they're gonna get I don't know. I hope that they don't get away with it. I guess we have to really push back and create a movement and try to make it so that it's politically unwise to keep going after Assange. But not to be a Debbie Downer, look what they're doing with Donziger, who's a Harvard law graduate who took on Chevron, but certainly didn't take on, and this is not an insult, I mean, he's an incredibly brave person. He's spent over 2 years under house arrest. He refused to back down against Chevron for poisoning the water in Ecuador, which literally killed people. And look at the Justice Department. I mean, what's interesting is you have these parallel, they're different, and in one case, it's the Justice Department is refusing to drop the case against Assange, and they are appealing it. The other case, the Justice Department is not acting. So in one case, we want them to stop doing what they're doing with Assange. In the other case, we want them to actually take the case back from the corporate prosecution and persecution of Donziger. But you have two people who take on power, and they are paying for it. I mean, let me
just say this, because that's a good point. You bring up Donziger. Before I forget, Donziger told me himself. He says, "Look, there's a big difference between me and Julian Assange. I just took on one of the biggest corporations on the planet.
Right.
He took on the entire national security state.
Yeah, exactly.
He says that's a much bigger apple to eat."
Yes. And he did it in a way, I mean, Donziger just took on one case. Again, very brave, has paid dearly for it. His son now his wife are now living in a house without their father and husband for 6 months, unless it's changed, and hopefully he will get out. He wasn't even granted bail. But yeah, he did take on one very powerful corporation, and he took on the kind of corporate legal complex, right? Because you have these corrupt judges, one of whom was a Clinton guy, interestingly enough. The other one is a Federalist Society, so a right winger who gives money, whose association is funded by
Clarence
Chevron.
Thomas and drag, basically.
Yeah, basically, yeah, and whiteface and drag, yeah. So that's they both stood up to power, and it's disgusting the treatment of both of them. And again, if we had, I guess it speaks to how, I don't want to sound like left blaming, but it speaks to the state of the left. We need to really, and maybe it's not just the left. Maybe this is one of the cases where where there can be kind of post-partisan unity, because I think that there are people on the right who are disgusted by the treatment of Donziger and of Assange. And in some ways, like, they're more hip to it than some liberals are in many ways, actually.
And let's not forget Daniel Hale. So you got
you're right, Daniel Hale, yeah.
And there's a woman I worked with in Texas, and that I worked on that Tulia case for 3.5 years, the Tulia 46, and somebody parachuted in late. Her name is Vanita Gupta. She's third in line now at the Justice Department. And you would think she would step in and say, I can't be part of this. Just like the guy from Homeland Security that split after the stuff that went on under that bridge in Texas.
Oh, right. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Someone stepped to the plate and left. You had others that have left.
With the treatment of Haitians.
So she should just leave instead of having her name on this particular case and the last two.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, there's no cost, I guess. There's no political cost. And we need to be out there and raising our voices. And I do think that we need to try to reach all people. I mean, I think that the fact that Julian has 2 young sons is an important part of this, because people do respond to kind of like human interest stories. I think that also needs to be part of it. I understand, though, Stella Morris doesn't want to put her children in the spotlight. I think it's an important thing for us to remind people about. He also, I think another important thing, and again, my brain is kind of in like, how do we reach people who aren't already with us? But, he did try to warn Hillary's State Department about something about, that's another important thing.
Yes, about cables, something to do with the cables.
That something was going to come out, that something was going to be published that that WikiLeaks didn't approve of publishing in the way that they were publishing it. This is not a guy, he's not some evil villain who doesn't care about human beings. And
he does.
He does.
Let me get back to that other point, because we only have a minute left, because I know you could riff on this, on that guy Siggy,
oh gosh.
trial.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they went to him. Who else could they have gone to?
Right. How bad is your
Jeffrey Dahmer?
Domner? Yeah, he
Or
wasn't
Richard
available,
Speck?
unfortunately. Yeah.
Richard Speck is dead.
Yeah.
You know, the
They
son of
didn't have that
Sam.
many options.
I mean,
yeah.
this is the worst friggin' person you could
Right.
possibly use as a witness.
Yeah, and again, if we had a responsible media, they'd be talking about this. I mean, right? Isn't this just newsworthy in itself? Star witness is a sex offender. You have, I mean, this is very dark, but one of the people that he, sexually harassed was a young man who wound up killing himself. I mean, this is a person who is a force for evil in the world, and he is the star witness of the case against Julian Assange. It's actually kind of a perfect metaphor if you want to do the good versus evil. And again, the FBI made a deal with him, and if they had any shame, they would be hiding from this case. They would be dropping it. But he's just too much of a threat to power, to state power, to security state, the intelligence community, that they just can't. They have to make a statement, I guess, or they think that they do. And anyone who saw him being dragged out of the embassy, again, if you have just a heart, like, that was really hard to watch. It was really hard to watch. And imagine if in Russia, imagine if Putin had gone after someone who exposed state secrets and then had gotten him extradited and was trying to extradite him. And imagine if the Russian, sorry, I don't know the Russian, I forget the name of the Russian equivalent of the CIA. FSB, right? Yeah. Oh, Randy, really rolls off the tongue for you.
Well, because I watch Malcolm Nance. I watch Malcolm Nance all the time. Malcolm Nance.
Oh, yeah.
That's all he says. Oh, the FSB and the GRU. The FSB and the GRU.
And he lied about Jill Stein, by the way. He said that she had a show. These people are such idiots. They literally think anyone that they don't like has a show on RT. And it's funny, Louise Mensch, I mean, I feel bad talking about her because she's not well, but she calls me like people would say, oh, you have a show on RT, and they literally show a screenshot of me, and it's like, guest Katie Halper. Like, they couldn't, it literally says guest, not host. Not that any of that matters, but it's just funny how idiotic these people are. But what were we just saying? Sorry, I forgot.
We were closing up here about Malcolm Nance. No, not about
Malcolm. No, imagine if the FSB had went in and it was revealed that the FSB had talked about killing or kidnapping someone, and then Putin tried to extradite that very someone. And imagine a judge had ruled that the extradition wasn't okay, had ruled against extradition because that prisoner would very possibly not survive prison. Can you imagine how up in arms the Western world would be? We'd be talking about
it would be a 24-hour. It would be a 24-hour special on the Jake Tapper show, and a 24-hour special with Chuck Todd. No question about it. Look Navalny. The white nationalist.
Right.
They've elevated him like he's some god figure. We've been talking with the great Katie Halper. We're going to go out here. Katie, first of all, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Idiots, and also the Katie Halper show. And we're going to just play a little bit of your stand-up and come back with someone we worked with the other day, and that is Roger Waters. We'll be right back with him. Thank you, Katie. Got to run, and don't go anywhere. We got a prize for you.
Oh, great.
But luckily, we have another reference for godless Jews such as myself, and that's Brother Bernard Sanders. St. Bernard. Bernie. I'm a Bernie. You're a Bernie, yeah. So he's my reference when people don't get how I can be Jewish but not religious. I'm like, I'm a Bernie Jew. And I don't know if you remember this, but some people during the primaries were actually accusing him of hiding his Jewishness. It's like, where? How? What? That's not a choice. That's like a luxury he doesn't have. First of all, his accent's a dead giveaway. He does the inverted R thing that a lot of New York Jews do, which is where they take off an R where it belongs and put it where it doesn't. So the idea of the way the pharmaceuticals plunder people, price gouge, is unacceptable in the richest country in the world. But honestly, we need to lock up the war criminals and free the whistleblowers who expose them. So,
well, we're back. Katie Halper, I want to thank her, and I want to thank Gabriel Shipton, and I want to thank Niels Melzer and, of course, Michael Isikoff. Now, this was pre-recorded. We interviewed Roger Waters, and it ended up being a 1-hour interview. So we're going to play that next week because he read from his memoir, The Wedding Ring. It's called The Wedding Ring, and it is just galvanizing. So that's going to be on next week. And what we're going to play right now, because I told you we're going to give you Roger Waters, and we are. This is Roger Waters from the other night, Sunday at Theater 80 St. Mark's, singing his other new composition, not a book, not from a memoir. The Wedding Ring is from a memoir. This is a composition that has not been released, but he, for the first time on stage, he played the piano and he sang all of the lyrics from the bar. So we're going to go out with that. And because who can follow it? So that's it, folks. We'll see you next week with the full Roger Waters interview. I'm Randy Credico. This is Randy Credico live on the fly here on the Progressive Radio Network. And here we go. Roger Waters, The Bar.
Does everybody in the bar feel pain? Yeah, sure they do. Is everybody in the bar a little mad? Yeah, both me and you. We traded in the family farm for snake oil. Bought into the carpet beggar's lies. Hang on. Now we're hanging on this cross with these feelings of loss. Just watching the Liberty boat sail on by. And if I cut you, will you bleed for me? If I bind your wounds, will you cry? And if I give you my hand, will you stand by me? Stand by me here till I die. Put out his hand to help me. Gave me credit at the company store. And I looked into his eyes. It would come as no surprise. I can't make these payments anymore. Does everybody in the bar feel shame? Lord knows I do. Does everybody in the bar feel pretty much the same? Kind of wore out by this crazy fucking zoo. The smell of napalm with the cornflakes shit for killing everything that breathes, imposing sanctions on the lady down the street. Till she takes the hint and packs her bags and leaves. Come on in here, sister, and sit us back. You are most welcome in the bar. This is the bar, by the way. You're in the fucking bar. Is that the bar is a refuge for those of us who care about other human beings and to live our lives with empathy. And the lady who I'm singing about, i.e. the one we imposed the sanctions on until she takes the hint and leaves, finally appears in the bar. Anyway, sorry. Come on in here, sister, and sit a spell. You are most welcome in the bar. We may seem few, but we are many. Have you been traveling far? The girl who brought you in here was Lakota. From Standing Rock, where they make their stand. So from Fort Yates, North Dakota, here's a message for the man. Would you kindly get the fuck off our land? Hey, boy, man, I have a question. One of many victims, tell me why. A failed fat fucking landlord has been chosen to decide who should live and who should die. Sweetheart, there's a reason you come in here. I know I was just putting on my dancing shoes. With the right set of moves, we could turn this ship around. Together we can write tomorrow's news. You are my side-eye lady. Come lay across my big breast bed. Yes, it's a reference to both. Maybe it is we who have been chosen, you and me, to point out this don't make no fucking sense. Bible. How long and winding is the road? How many children singing? Sorry. How many children singing? Not sure what the chord is. How many mothers' sleeves? Saying, look, Ma, the man ain't got no fucking clothes. You can help them build a barn at Raytheon. Sell it on in Kalamazoo. And some crazy motherfucker's bound to drop it on a busload of kids going to school. You can hold up your hands in denial. Justify the choices in your head. Just an innocent cop, just doing your job. But those little Yemeni kids will still be dead. Do I sound a tad holier than thou? Well, sir, maybe I am. I admit it came easy to me to resist this fucking system. Uneducated as I am. I eschewed the Bible for Keezy. Thought I'd try on a different hat. Lost the line. Just following orders don't come easy to me. I guess it just ain't where I'm at. So when I'm drinking my coffee in the morning, sorry, I'm there, and I read about all this Yemeni shit. I feel so fucking bad for that grieving foreigner picking through the bus that's just been hit. So on Monday, when you're walking through the factory gates, and on Friday when you're picking up your check, you'll be sitting on the curbside like the bicycle lane. But with no kid to put his arms round daddy's neck. I'm nearly there. Before I was born, my brother used to sit on Daddy's lap when he was home on leave. He'd smoke a cigarette, and sometimes just he'd blow smoke rings up my big brother's sleeve. More fire, Daddy, my big brother would shoot. At least that's how the story has survived. I was mercifully spared the memories that they shared. I was only 5 months old when Daddy died. Gonna call up a friend in Australia. And order in some bush tucker snacks. And dance here with you to the didgeridoo. And listen. And listen while you sing me all the maps. Is that a foghorn in the distance? Oh, we heading for the rocks. Come sit here by the fireside and hold me in your arms. And tell me, how was life before the cops?